Now we are going to have a conversation. The headline is People on Peace.
People on Peace.
And I would just make two notes I want to introduce to you. And the one of them is called, I have said, The Stream of Violence. And it is from an Geneva Academy who says this: today's armed conflict. I looked this up a couple of days ago, and they say we have now more than 110 armed conflict. Some of these conflicts make the headlines, others do not. Some of them started recently, while others have lasted for more than 50 years. Middle East and North Africa, more than 45 armed conflicts. Africa, more than 35 armed conflict. Asia, 21 armed conflict. Europe, 7 armed conflict. Latin America, 6 armed conflict. And they follow this, and they follow up on each conflict.
Wow.
And then also I would like to mention that for me the question of peace is central. For me personally, it's very, in a way, a first priority. And also for me it seems to be central to the teaching of Krishnamurti. And I will just mention some titles of Krishnamurti books. And one is called Can Conflict End? Another is called Action Without Conflict. Another is called Beyond Violence. One is called Don't Make a Problem of Anything. Another one, Where Can Peace Be Found? Then there is a theme book just called On Conflict. Another book is called The World of Peace. And the last one is Education and World Peace. These are the titles you can get.
Yes.
Which is very close connected, in the title at least, to peace. So, yes, I don't know how you will go on from this, but...
Well, I think it lays out beautifully the panorama, no? What is going on now worldwide, how many conflicts there are. I wasn't even aware of all this. The numbers are staggering. Just in the Middle East and North Africa, that there are over 20. I mean, it's incredible. And that we have 6 in Europe. I wasn't even thinking what? I think we only have 1.
Yeah.
But there are several. So, that to begin with, that the extent of conflict in the current world, we're not even fully aware of it. We think there's only 1 and 2, what we get mostly attention, the news gets draws our attention to. And I mean, I've been very worried about it personally. As you can imagine, here in Europe we have a conflict next door. So it's not like we are not in it. The distance is so small and the threat is so total for us. It could break, it's a little thin line somewhere there, which could be broken anytime, one way or the other. And then the Gaza conflict, the Gaza genocide, I would dare to call it, it's affecting us all because of the history and the involvement of the European powers in setting up the state of Israel, as a Jewish state. So I've read quite a bit about that, for example, and how would you put it? The inability or unwillingness of the people in power to face facts. The history is there. It's all mapped out. Serious concerned people have written about it, have laid out the map of how things come to this pass, to this state. And the picture is, in my opinion, clear, objective, and so on. But there is a negation of those facts because of overriding interests, overriding even fears and concerns for identity and security. That's what's happening there as far as I can tell. And while not using the general, assessment of it, as settler colonialism, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, and leading to genocide, which is obviously the case, the responsibility, the world powers, and Europe in particular as well, just forget the United States or forget Britain, to tackle the issue frontally and saying this we will not allow. We will not allow the murdering of people just like that. We will not. There is a solution, but for that solution, everybody must be willing to face facts. Look at it. That peace, a lot of it has to do with just that. Can we face facts and not distort them? And not distort them especially in terms of separate group interests, and therefore the relationship of power, the establishment of relationships of power. Externally, that can be seen fairly simply, complex as it appears to be. But then you see when Kay asks things like this, where can peace be found? The ending of conflict, or conflict, what does it mean? He, of course, as you know very well, as we know, he brings it closer to home. And that is a delicate thing, because then you and I, as human beings, are directly involved. And in fact, he lays the responsibility right on our doorstep. His famous statement, right? War is the bloody and spectacular expression of our daily lives. So it's an extension of whatever you and I are in our relationships with things, with people and ideas, essentially, and also our notions of ourselves. So that is, I find that salutary in the first place, that therefore you don't think of conflict as out there, but that one is directly involved. One may not be now involved in the Gaza situation because one happens not to live there and be a Palestinian or a Jew even, or share either from being abroad. But actually that is just a manifestation of the overall structure of conflict, what you call the stream of violence that has been marking human history. I mean, it's really, I think I heard one historian saying, history is just the record of human violence, right? Collectively, externally. So that is a very delicate thing, because then of course, how he goes about it. Kay actually, I think, begins with conflict, oftentimes in his teachings, and when he starts talking, in his lectures, in his talks, in his books, everywhere, begins basically with a chapter on conflict, to point out that is the condition of humanity, right? That our general condition is of fragmentation and division and conflict. And that this is the kind of the first chapter in the whole inquiry. This is what we meet the reality and therefore the necessity of change. If this continues, then the suffering continues, then the mutual destruction, and not just of each other, but of nature and so on, will go on. Is the lack of relationship, as he puts it. So what does that mean, What does that all imply? And also brings the question of your and my capacity to do anything about all this. That's another issue, right? Because in terms of the macro picture, an individual like you and I feels so impotent because we're not in power, we don't even have money or whatever it is. We can say something, we can utter an opinion, and maybe a right opinion, a right, concerned, responsible answer to this whole thing, but the whole thing goes on. So that's also another aspect of what we're talking about. And I would share with you the same interest, that this peace is essential for me as well. Because I see, and I've seen since I was a little kid, how dangerous, destructive actually, conflict is. I knew domestic violence, I knew violence at school, bullying, the oppression of authority, the continuous friction between one person and another, the lack of love ultimately, no, the lack of affection, kindness, sensitivity to each other is always an issue, a friction, and therefore relationship falls again into that structure of power. See, the same with the governments and peoples and tribes, the individuals do the same to each other. So there's a pervasive pattern of division, of power. That's what it ends up in.
Yeah. I would like to hear, it was not so clear to me why you in the same sentence talk about division, conflict and power. I didn't quite, it was not in my mind, power. Is it inevitable?
Right. Why did I bring that in? I guess because of my sense that if there is conflict, then inevitably it's a relationship of power. Somebody must win. Somebody must stand above somebody else.
Yeah.
There must be the oppressor and the oppressed, the leader and the follower. That whole structure. I think is inevitable in that. I see it as a logical extension. Division, conflict, power degenerates into a relationship of power. Right? If there is no proper relationship in the first place, a non-divisive thing, right? That's how I see it. Power. That's why you have, and I think the relationship of power is invariably inherently violent, because it comes from conflict. There's really no good relationship in power, from power, because I think it's an outcome of conflict itself.
Yeah.
You're trying to force something, right? In Star Wars, I think in one of the Star Wars little films that I watched sometime with my kids, there was the representative of the Empire talking to one of the rebels who was just disguised as one of the soldiers of the Empire. And he's sitting down having a drink, and the general of the commander of the general of the imperial forces says, everybody talks about wanting freedom, but what they really want is order, and order is only guaranteed by the empire.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's an old thing of the question also of order, of security, and authority, and freedom. How those three work together. And it seems that mankind has also found it difficult, just to paint the other side, the imperialist side of the argument, has found it difficult to be free and responsible. See?
Yeah.
That there are tendencies in which our freedom has been misused, has been in fact used to exploit others, instead of creating a world of harmony and so on, and mutual cooperation. It has been used for exploitation and the rest of it, and that we have called freedom. But freedom cannot go together with oppression. If freedom then is just for you, not for the other. Right? Yeah. So that politically has been a disaster. That's why the empires have arisen. And the pursuit of order misunderstood, right? And the pursuit of security, also misunderstood, has been one major contributing factors to this endemic, the perpetuation of conflict and violence among us.
It's interesting to bring in the notion of order, I think, because I think Krishnamurti maybe would say, conflict is disorder.
That's what he would normally mean, yes.
Yeah, and also if we could expand a little more about order and authority, because it seems, without authority, it doesn't work in every field of life almost.
Yeah.
So this, yes, and when we have authority, there will be rebellion.
Which invites another kind of disorder.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, see, in Spain, where I come from, we lived under a dictatorship. Until I was 17, he died when I was 17. So imagine, it was much before Franco, dictator. And when Franco died, people said, "Oh my God, now we will open the door to disorder. We will be better off with Franco." Because the democracy just threw the whole thing open, and it was chaos for a while. Because everybody thought they were free to do whatever they wanted. And everybody was horrified, right? I mean, simple things, I mind you, because it was a very conservative kind of order that Franco had created. He was a very traditionalist kind of mind. So, but people got used to it, and he functioned at that level, created social order. He wasn't really order, because there was no freedom. It was very restricted levels of freedom. And without freedom, there's no order. That's the funny part, isn't it? There's no real order without freedom. So how do you put the two together? See, and authority comes in, of course, to counter the excesses of freedom. This is what happened actually in Spanish history. The Republic, the Second Republic came along in 1930, and they threw the whole thing open. Revolution. So they started going against the church, against the landowner class, and everything. They tried to restructure the whole country, revolutionize the whole structure of society, and so on and so forth. The others got in a panic, and they also committed certain excesses. They started burning convents and things like this. So then the traditionalist reactionary movement came in to re-establish order. But in the process, they ended up in a civil war, which killed 1 million people, or something like that. And then, of course, the victors started to create their own order. But they destroyed the whole society. The whole society was now traumatized by that imposition of order. That could not be called order. And then the new order, of course, was authoritarian. Because only through dictate can you ensure that the whole country works as one. And it was a monolithic type of political government. There was only one idea, not two. No opposition, no contraries, nothing. You just manage the affairs according to that ideological structure. And, okay, the country worked at a certain level, right? But there was not real freedom there, no real capacity to discuss, because you couldn't ever question what was happening. You couldn't question. Now, when you eliminate the capacity to question, you also eliminate the intelligence. Without questioning, I think intelligence can't function, can go beyond itself. So we couldn't question your father, pater familias, authority at home. You couldn't question the teacher. You couldn't question the priest. And you couldn't question the bureaucrats and the government, because they had the authority. They were the authority. So authority meant that which could not be questioned. Now that makes for an instant separation between the system and the individual. The individual is made to submit, no matter how many doubts, how many incoherences the authorities are propounding. To begin with, that is an incoherence, to say we're creating order by denying questioning, by denying the exercise of sensitivity and intelligence. If you deny intelligence, you could never have order. I don't see the possibility. Maybe some people do, but I don't. I think order and intelligence and freedom go together. And that's just the problem, maybe. You see, in the church, that's maybe my clear...
What did you say? What go to it? Order?
Freedom? Order, freedom and intelligence.
Freedom and intelligence, yes.
If you try to create order by denying freedom or by denying intelligence, then you are denying order. That's one way of putting it. Yeah. Without intelligence and freedom, there will be no order. But you see also, freedom without intelligence, there will be no order. They have to go together. You see, many people take their freedom, what they think freedom, but they don't exercise their intelligence. And therefore, what results is chaos. So you have to have intelligence, and intelligence requires sensitivity, as it does a kind of compassion or feeling for others, the concern for others. So those three, the sense of, call it love, call it affection, sensitivity, and intelligence really constitute the wholeness of our being. And the church, for example, tried to bring across, create goodness in us, which is total sense of togetherness, of no division and conflict. That's what goodness ends up being. So they had a good intention, But they went at it by denying sensitivity, denying love, and denying intelligence, because they emphasized authority, dogmatism. So authority in that regard is the denial of wholeness. And without wholeness, there is no order. See, it's an extraordinary subtle, I mean, I put it in words like this and that conceptually, but it's a tremendous, see, that would be, from my opinion, that was one of the contradictions, that in their good intention to create order, both the dictator as well as the bishop and the teacher and the policeman and my pater familias, they destroyed the whole thing, because there was not allowed for sensitivity. If you had a perception of your own that contradicted their dogmas and their beliefs, then that perception was denied, even though that perception was correct. Right? If you exercise your intelligence and saw the contradictions through the contradictions of their own approach, and you raise questions about it, that was denied, because they could not be questioned. And then, in the process, naturally, they punished you for it. They denied their own affection. The preachers always preaching about love, but they had no love, because what they were doing was putting you continuously in a position of the guilty, of someone who was guilty both inwardly as well as outwardly for questioning the system and so on. So there was a contradiction, total contradiction. And for me that was a great pity, because we could have gone differently. But they also were afraid to go back to freedom because of the kind of disorder and the kind of undermining of the established order, so-called, you see, or the traditional established order of the ruling classes and so on. That freedom would undermine it. They would have to let go also of something of their own for the benefit of the whole. And they were not willing to do that either, see? It's a horrible thing in history.
But I was thinking that often we just, when we use the word peace, it is, what we mean is peace between two wars or two conflicts. But of course we want to understand peace in a deeper or broader way. And because it seems to, many places there are peace without all what you have just told.
Yes, correct.
Without freedom, there is peace without freedom.
Yeah.
There is peace without sensitivity. Mm-hmm. It's just
without love.
Yeah,
without intelligence.
Yeah. So peace is in that way. It reminds me, that peace is very often regarded as something not, not fun or not creative or something boring.
A state of placidity, of sort of we're okay, this is calm enough, and they're satisfied with the situation.
And nothing really happens.
There's no disturbance anywhere to be found.
Yeah,
Switzerland.
But maybe, I think Krishnamurti, regard peace something quite different.
I agree.
I think he sometimes connected with creativity.
Yes,
for instance,
yes.
That and he said, peace is not something you just say, okay, now I will be peaceful. That doesn't work.
Apparently not. I wish it did.
Yes, I wish it did. But there's much more in it.
Yes, right.
Yeah, and if we could move from the society,
yes, we must
more close to relationship and into ourselves as well.
Yes.
And say, in a way, I think we are brought up to in competition and in comparison, for instance. And we also are brought up in that me is very important. The individual is it's all about the individual. So all this thing, I think, all these features of what about them? How can we understand how? Yes. One question come to my mind, which Kay is posing. It is, what will you pay if you want peace? One thing for me is very clear, that if you want peace, you have to be peaceful yourself. You cannot have peace in a society with a lot of violent people. That's in a way a kind of a logical.
Yes.
So in that way, for me, logical at least, and I cannot see it other ways. That there is a responsibility here. That wanting peace or praying for peace, it's not good enough.
Not good enough. No.
It's not good enough.
Absolutely not.
So yes, how can we dig into peace in oneself and in our relationship with each other on a daily basis?
Quite right. Because that's where it really plays out. Then you have the social extensions and the dynamics that they already are at that level of power. So let's leave that for a moment, because we said it's daily life, and daily life is our relationships, right? So let's see how we can do that. You were mentioning several things. No, we maybe start from there. You were mentioning competition and comparison and individualism, the emphasis on the individual. So that is already something. No, there are basic aspects of our friction with others, of not being together, not working together. It makes for conflict already. Depends on how one does it, of course, but comparison, I mean, he puts a lot of emphasis on that word, which in principle doesn't look so big, doesn't look like a big thing. You compare X with Y, and that is part of the language. No? This is bigger than that, this is smaller than that, this is equal to that. I remember learning this as a kid, no? When you learn language, the comparative aspect of language. So is this plus or minus equal? Like in maths, simple thing, and you have slight variations on that. That seems logical, natural, is how you measure things, and you have to.
Yeah.
Now, why is measuring between people destructive, for example? And I remember as a kid thinking, all right, the person who has more money is more of a person for having money than one person who doesn't have money. And my answer was no, that the money doesn't add to your person. As a human being, your possessions don't add up to your worth. That there's another ground in which those things don't matter. They are material projections of your own worth, whereas as a person, that doesn't count. They're external factors. So we make.
But okay, I'm just being personal a little bit.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
We must be personal.
Yeah, it seems how come you noticed that as a boy?
Because there was always.
It's very strange. The normal thing is that well-known people or people who have achieved something, rich people or people in the newspapers. Tendency is that they are more important. That you better. you better know them or something.
Yes, or take them as models and try to emulate them. Yeah. I don't remember how that happened, but I think it had to do with this constant comparison that was going on, and my questioning the social values, because this was part of the social value. I may have been slightly lucky in being born in a peasant background, in a sort of subsistence farming community. We lived off the land and the sea a little bit and so on. So we were on the lower level of society, but that never bothered me. I always saw the difference between your social status and your own human worth. They were not the same. I somehow very quickly saw that difference, that a very wealthy person could be a rotten egg, and a very poor person could be a saint. That Christ had no thing, and he didn't ever give a fig about owning absolutely anything. And yet we're all Christians and we're grabbing for that, for the status, money, and success. So there's been a misunderstanding. For me, it was very early obvious that there was a misunderstanding in terms of how we project our own self-worth or measure our self-worth by these external possessions, and that there was no relation between the two, or minor. Anyway, you can say, oh, we admire that guy because he has a talent for this and he brings this across. That's good, but it does not reflect on their importance only at that level, and not if they focus the benefit on themselves either, but on the whole, right? Mm-hmm. You see, a very different thing. Yeah. It was the good old thing of the Christian. Even the Christians had it somewhere hidden in the barrage of doctrines. Of that your work is significant in as much as it benefits mankind. You are not important by yourself, and you cannot attribute the benefit to yourself of what you do, because in that case it becomes self-centered, and you cease of the charity, of the love that you owe the whole world. They had it somewhere in there themselves, but of course that was not the way. No. we were this comparative measurement was too powerful, and it was always the status, who has more, to have is to be. The whole thing was going on like this, and it could be anything. It could be things, money, status, knowledge, success, the whole thing, up the scale, and it never seemed to me at all genuine.
I just a thought coming to my mind that right now we have Tour de France.
Oh yeah.
And many when they win, they give credit to the whole team.
Yes.
I don't know if it's a kind of politeness or what it is, but there is something factual in it. Which many times we seem to forget. That we praise the individual. In many respects,
And we have even to go beyond the group. We had to go beyond the tribe. We had to look at humanity even as a whole. You see, that's part of our issue.
Yeah.
That the individual you were talking about, right? Yeah. Is it me that is important? And the new religion of fulfillment is all about fulfillment, and you have to fulfill. But the fulfillment falls into the old pattern of money, status, success, and so on. And you say, well, yes, all right, is there an individual? Okay, even brings it there. Are you an individual? And he says, yes and no. No? He says no, mostly. You're not an individual because you're the result. You're not unique in that regard because you're the result of the whole stream of human experience. And you have a collective influence, a particular influence from the family, and you have made also your own concoction psychologically from your experience and upbringing and all that. Yeah. But so therefore, you're a collective entity mostly, with particular differences here and there. And then he goes on to the etymological meaning of the word as undivided. He says nobody is undivided. So denies it on those two counts mostly. On the other hand, each of us, as the representative of mankind, it's in each of us where the change can take place. It's funny, it doesn't seem to take place collectively. So the individual has a tremendous responsibility. It seems almost a contradiction in his teachings. Yeah. That he said, I'm addressing the individual. But it turns out that he was denying the existence of the individual all the time. So whom was he addressing? Right? That was a bit of my logical problem with K's denial of individualism, and yet insisting that he was not addressing the collective, he was addressing the individual. Yeah. But of course he brought them together by saying the individual is the whole of mankind. So I guess he was addressing the whole in the particular, and that it is there when the particular individual acknowledges that he is the whole of humanity that already a significant change has taken place away from the stream of violence.
Oh,
see,
yeah,
that I found very interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, it would need a little more discussion maybe to clear that up even for myself.
Yeah.
But you see the beauty of it, no, of the individual who awakens to the totality, the universality of his own being, that he is mankind and not separate from mankind, has already dissolved that division undone that division, which is the source of conflict, according to Kay. He had this thing, right? Remember, which I find is still needs to be gone into very deeply, of what he called a law, Krishnamurti's law.
Krishnamurti's law.
Where there is division, there must be conflict. He talks psychologically, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where there is division, there must be conflict.
Yeah.
So Krishnamurti's law, and one of the divisions is this one, between me and society, between me and humanity, that I am a separate entity. So the individual, so-called, who realizes that he's mankind, has already dissolved. He's in part of his separateness.
Yeah.
He sees in that one ground of compassion already, because you see what doesn't allow us to feel for another is this total separateness. Right? That's how you can kill another, because you have no feeling whatsoever for them. Right? That's how it's happening right now.
Yeah.
In all these conflicts that you mentioned earlier, impressive list.
Yeah.
And that's how the separation is so total between me and another, that I no longer recognize them as the same as me, as a human being. I am a human being and they are an animal. That's the usual language, right?
That's in a way, it's the only way you can kill another.
It's the only way, I think.
Yeah.
You have to dehumanize them
Yeah.
in order for you to feel at ease with your own criminal actions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to dehumanize them. You have to call them a beast, a savage, this and that, which just shows also what relationship we have with animals and with savages. It's strictly destructive.
Yeah.
Right?
Even, he can say it very in a few words. When you are killing another, you are killing yourself.
Yeah, but you see, because you are mankind, and they are mankind, and the killing of another is to killing yourself. So, you see, just to realize that, if we were to realize that, is a tremendous thing. And that goes to small, subtle levels. When you hurt another, you're hurting yourself. When you cheat another, you're cheating yourself. When exploiting another, you're exploiting yourself. You have to see the connection. We break the connection. We break the inherent oneness of being human, and not just human, but with all that is being life, in the whole movement of life. That's where Kay, I think, finds ultimately peace, is in that dissolution of these divisions, so that the division does not arise, and the conflict does not arise, and the war does not arise. But it's subtle. It's subtler even than that, no?
Yeah, and I think I think most of us we are brought up with that the world exists of separate things, and they interact with each other. But and I think it goes very deep. I don't that the world is one. In a way, it sounds great in a way,
but it's not the way we live.
It's not the way we are brought up. It's not the way we look at the world. It is not
quite right.
So it's quite. But even I was thinking that even as an idea, not a realization, but as the idea and the logic of that, that fear is general. It's common to all mankind.
Everybody's afraid.
Everybody's afraid.
No
all this
fear,
kind of
right?
thing. I often, I can see in myself that the perspective is totally different. Normally, if I fight with myself, it's my anxiety or my greed or everything I don't like about humans, and if it's mine, it's my problem. And the perspective is immediately different when I kind of open the window to that. It's not only mine. It's not. It's a common problem. And then we can meet.
Yeah.
And we will not meet as this problem is mine and not yours. It is a human problem.
Exactly.
And that's a kind of a release in a way, even intellectually. For me, it's a kind of.
For me too. Too. Yeah, because with the separateness itself, you see, there you are. The problem is common, but we appropriate it as separate.
Yeah.
The sorrow is yours and the sorrow is mine. And the fear is yours and the fear is mine. What if we were to come together and say, well, You know, like in the Gaza conflict, I told somebody who says that, look, there's no Jewish suffering and Palestinian suffering. There is suffering they're inflicting on each other precisely because they are Palestinians and Jews. So the very division of the appropriation of experience as separate, marking a total divide from another, is the source of suffering. If we could come to that common ground, you see, suffering itself becomes a common ground.
Yeah.
If all these people at war could meet each other in that common ground, that would be already the beginning, in my view, of an ending of the conflict, because they would see that it's the same suffering. And while you see they take refuge in that we are better off because fewer dead for us than for you, that's power, right? Again, yeah. But the suffering is the same, because the suffering you inflict on another is a suffering you inflict on yourself. You have to have a very thick skin not to realize that.
Yeah. But even, this kind of belonging to something, to a nationality and so on, it's very, it's steady. If there is a plane crash somewhere, always in Denmark they ask, were there any Danes?
Yep.
That's the first thing, That's the first thing.
Yeah.
188 people died, no Danes. Okay.
Okay, yeah, so we're all right.
I mean, it's the first thing.
Every country does this, actually.
Yeah,
yes, I noticed that too.
Yeah.
See, the two Spaniards died.
Yeah.
We'd make that division. See, at one time, I was trying to figure it out and saying, all right, what can you do in view of all these conflicts? Because that was my friends were having this discussion. You see this conflict, you see the horror of it, and you are there in your own little corner, maybe with your own little problems and your own little conflicts. And you say, what can we do? And the sense of impotence was just general. We can't do anything. All right, we joined some manifestations, some public things and so on, and they chanted this and that. But that doesn't go very far. The police comes and just shoots you with water.
Yeah.
The rest. So, okay. And I said, well, let's give a clue as to what you and I can do as individuals to answer these issues. And what he says is, the root of all these conflicts is in each of us. Now, if that's the case, then we have it in us to do something about it. About the root. Not about maybe the expression of that conflict, a particular conflict. Though we may have a lot to do with that as well. It depends whom we vote to Brussels or whatever.
Yeah.
So that sort of thing. But this thing, beginning with where there is division, there must be conflict. So then the conflict falls into second place. What's important now is division. And because that's the cause. Now he says, what's the cause of division? And he says the cause of division is the image that I make of you in relationship, and the image you make of me, and the image I have of myself. So he focuses the division on image making, which sounds very vague. No? What's an image? An image is something that, there are any thousands of images passing through this glass every day. And if it was a mirror, there would be full of images. No? People who pass before the mirror, the image disappears. It's an appearance. But for us, it's more than an appearance. It's actually it's an identity. It's what we identify with. The history, the concept, the name, the experience, the background. That becomes a package, and that becomes the factor of separateness, both individually as well as collectively. They function like entities. So he says this is where we have it, at the relationship level. Now, what?
So here we have, that the image which is we create. It is our reality.
Yes.
So in that way, we don't regard it. We don't see it as an image.
No.
I'm Dane. And you are Swedish, and you're not.
Yeah. Comes with his own valuation and difference.
And so that is one of the things, to kind of to be aware of that the image we make becomes our reality. We
becomes
function-
a reality.
Yeah.
But this is part of the trick of thinking, right?
Yeah.
Consciousness can turn any images into a reality. And that's amazing, because of course we need the image to inform us, right? Whereas Mürren, there's a map, there's an image, and then you have a memory and all that. So there's information simply in images, image making.
Yeah.
But then the image becomes me. The image becomes the very definition of my being. And that creates a border. The image itself is its own border. It begins to say me and not me. It starts that process of the me and the not me. What's within the image and what's outside the image.
Oh, yeah.
Partly, right?
Yeah,
It's Swedish and Danish. So that you can see already the difference, right? Not only geographical, there's a little strip of water there,
Right.
in the Baltic Sea.
Yeah.
But there's all the other things, associations that come with it, you see.
Yeah.
We're better off at this and they're better off at that, and so on. And maybe there's a little bit of history there.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple of wars when the Swedish tried to take over. So whatever it was. So the border of the image. And how does it get so powerful? The image. How does it get so powerful? See, how does the image acquire such total importance?
Yeah.
Why is it that the image, if it is an image, because as you say, for us it's not really just an image, it's a very definition of what we are. It's a reality.
Yeah.
A reality. How does an image become a reality? Right?
Yeah.
And if it is, in fact, the source of conflict, then one has to question it very strongly, right?
Yeah.
As to what is the reality of this image. Why is it so controlling? Why is thought creating this separateness? Okay, brings it ultimately to the fact that thought per se is separative, is fragmentary. That's a tough one to understand. That as long as we function from thinking, and especially psychologically, which is where we focus our own sense of being, what is me is the psychological entity, and that is built up of all these images, right? And then a central image I call me.
Yeah.
And he says, but thought itself, because of its dependence on memory, is inherently divisive, because my memory is not your memory. I would have to come to the point of understanding that we share that structure, rather than the content of the memory, for us to meet.
Yeah.
I can't lean on my Spanish background to meet you. I have to lean on the human background of the structure of identification and suffering and all that in order to meet you. There's where we can meet.
Yeah.
We can't meet as Spanish and Danes unless we're fighting somebody else.
Yeah.
That's the process of history, you see.
Yeah.
But that's interesting to me. You see how
It's interesting.
at what level we're going to dissolve these divisions. See, because they're so strong.
I just want to mention one thing when we talk about image making. You know, I just want to say experience. You know, and for me it's kind of I have an experience, and it is a real experience, and it's and it kind of it's put into memory, or it then in a kind of an image, but in a way, you know, it's because, you know, image for me, it could tend to sound like a fantasy, but
A fiction.
a fiction, you know. But my experience, you know, I would say my experience tell me. So that's not a fantasy. I have experienced it not only one time, but again and again. So it is so that, you know, Swedish people, sorry Sweden,
Yeah, my experience is
and that's all, you know.
exactly right. This is very interesting because experience is also produced by the image, and we don't realize it.
We don't. Yeah.
This is part of the problem, right? We experience according to the image, and therefore the image gets reinforced, the sense of reality. Look, the Palestinians and the Israelis are always having the same experience, right?
Yeah.
Because of the image that is governing their identity and their separateness, and that's how they experience it, inevitably. So experience is not a valid. This is what we're questioning. We're questioning, rather. It would indicate, let's put it more softly, not absolutely. It would indicate that experience is not a reliable basis on which to establish reality.
Oh yeah, that's a hard one in a way.
Very hard, because we all lean on experience to determine reality. You know, like in science, what is true, what is factual.
Yeah.
And we do that, but psychologically, it just so happens that every identity has its experience according to the image it already holds.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And therefore, that's not reality. The reality is created, defined and conditioned by that image already, right? It's really tricky, because then you know, how can you break through? How can you see the Swedish people?
I was thinking of the word confirmation.
Confirms itself.
You know, image maybe need or is always searching for confirmation.
Agreed.
You know, that's why I look at you as oh, you are really Spanish.
Absolutely, and especially when I put on a hat.
So I thought you were Spanish. Now I know.
You should see me watching the Spanish national team now in the European Cup when they play well. See the this was also another thing, even from my childhood, of how can you be defined as anything? How can you be defined as belonging to this family, belonging to this racial, linguistic, geographic group, to this religious stream, to this ideological stream? How can you, as a human being, be confined to any particular aspect of the whole spectrum of human experience? There was an issue, because I said, what does it mean to be human? Isn't human the word, though the word means to come from the ground, from humus, the nature of
humus.
We come from the ground. Okay. So there is an interesting also aspect of human, being human, that you come from the ground. Right, God made us out of mud and all that kind of thing, and then whoop, blew some with a little straw, some air into us. Nice guy, good sculptor. But what does it mean to be human? And it seemed to me that one of the quintessential aspirations or inherent aspirations, I don't know, longings, movements, urges, I don't know exactly what word would be precise there, is to universality. That it doesn't, that the word human itself does not admit confinement to X, Y, Z.
I'm a little uncertain on the word, just the meaning of the word confinement.
Confinement, it means just restricting to a particular space or a particular concept, of course. It means just restraining to a limited domain, constrained,
belonging to a
limited definition, identity, space, right? Restricted to this, right? The Swiss are restricted to Switzerland, and they're restricted to that whole stream of their particular history that has brought them to this spot, to this point, and that's how they are, and it's the same for everybody. But my feeling was that misses out on a lot, because underneath there is this human common ground. We're coming back a little bit to the same thing about each of us embodying the whole of humanity. It seemed to me that was a quintessential point to understand in terms of one's own true dimensions, the true dimensions of one's being, and the necessary ground of proper relationship with everyone. Because what we have in conflict is the breakdown of relationship, total breakdown. And relationship, I take very seriously that phrase of case. Life is relationship. And you can't exist in isolation. And yet the movement is to isolate. Right? As collectively, in little groups, little sects, little this, little that, and also individually. The movement to isolation is really the issue behind peace. Because it is the cause of conflict. That's how K at least makes the diagnosis, and I think there's a lot to it. When I isolate myself from you, separate myself from you, there's the me and the not me. That is the beginning of the whole thing. But that also happens internally. We have to touch on that.
Yeah.
Right? How does it happen that
How does it happen that I am not me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I be me and at peace with myself and not not a scratch from within?
Yeah.
How can the mind itself and the heart or whatever aspects we have enter into contradiction, enter into conflict? That was puzzling to me, has ever been puzzling to me. Because it would say, as a person, you're a whole thing, right? That's the assumption. As a human being, I'm already given a certain wholeness, because I'm me, and you are you, and everybody sort of contains that. But internally, the same kind of struggle goes on as it goes out externally. And that's an old observation. It's not just even Krishnamurti only that makes it. It was made by Plato, when I read him 2,500 years ago, 2,400 years ago at least. Saying, the condition of humanity is of public war, of every man with every man, and of private war of each man with himself. That's a quote from Plato.
Okay.
And you say to yourself, how they were aware of this 2,400, 2,500 years ago, and probably much before that. He was the one who just voiced it. But there must be probably an awareness already coming from somewhere else, probably from a whole culture. How come we dealt a little bit with the external thing, which is not external because it's all psychological at the end of the day? But how does the psyche itself split itself into conflict so that you and I are in contradiction with ourselves, with aspects of ourselves, the self at war with itself? That internally also there's the me and the not me.
Yeah.
How come?
The first thing I think that it would be if there is no ideal. So where is the conflict?
Right. There's no ideal.
If there's no ideal, so and in that way, the inner conflict seems to, it seems to come from outside in a way.
Yes.
from the culture, which have all kind of ideals. What should be and what not should be.
That's right.
And so on.
Quite.
So.
Quite.
Yeah.
Quite right.
So
it's not even
I don't
internal.
know if there is any other causes to this kind of strange thing of Krishnamurti, he mentioned several things: the observer, the observed thinker, and the thought.
Quite right.
And and he say we take it for granted. I think. And so it's very built in our language and so on. But many times in the end of the day, it seems that for me it has become ridiculous to even all this questioning to myself. Sometimes it's kind of who am I?
Quite. Why am I even who's questioning whom?
It's kind of funny or strange. I don't know.
But you're saying something very beautiful, I think, in there, which is usually in our normal discourse around Krishnamurti groups we miss, I think, which is what you just said earlier, that if not all, but maybe all, this conflict that we experience with ourselves is created by an outside source. It has an external source. It's not even an internal source. It's the culture. I remember, as a Catholic boy, being told, I had to learn the 10 Commandments and the 7 deadly sins and everything else. The whole code of the religion, the ethical code. And the ethical code is, of course, a measurement of good and evil, right? Of, all right, thou shalt not lie. And I lie. So you have to go to the priest and say, I lied, and then he says, no, it says Pater Noster, blah, blah, blah. So, you get through it. And maybe you see also that you shouldn't lie. Simple. Not because of the ideal, but because there is something wrong with it, right? You break down the trust and all that kind of stuff.
And also in lie there is already division.
Yeah.
The fact and what you tell is the fact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then of course, thou shalt not entertain impure thoughts. That was one of my problems. because I was always having sexual thoughts as a kid, as an adolescent especially, and the guilt trip that it puts on you. So, but was it, without that instruction and that ideal, would I been in contradiction with myself? It was created in great part by this external injunction and the moral ideal that it demanded from me, conformity to that ideal, and which went contrary, in fact, maybe to my own nature or to our own nature. Maybe it's natural to think sexually. Yeah. And if they wanted to point out that there was some, how you say, unethical aspect to that, then they would have to go into it with me, not just create a certain sense of moral condemnation and you're going to hell in a handbasket because you just had a sexual fantasy about the neighbor's daughter or whatever it was. Yeah. So that's part of what I understand you to mean, and I think that covers a lot of how we end up in conflict with ourselves. It took me years, decades, to be free from that sense of guilt concerning sexuality. So imagine you can go through a lifetime struggling with yourself because of somebody you cannot come to terms with the actuality of what you're doing. That's part of the problem. They take us away from the actuality. Instead of saying, all right, let's look at that. Why is that happening? Maybe it's a natural function. Your hormones are going this. The mind is doing that. But then we look at the whole question of pleasure. And then we see with desire. We go further, deeper, and understand it maybe. And maybe there is something that is questionable about that whole operation. It's not accepting it, but also not rejecting it. It's not condemning and it's not accepting. So you have to go, is becoming intelligent, sensitive to the whole inner operation of consciousness. That's a totally different thing.
Do you think, I'm just thinking that maybe, the religions try to make a shortcut.
Yeah, a shortcut, exactly. See, like the dictators did.
Yeah. And
let's cut out freedom and we have order.
I don't know, but the intention, on the surface at least, was to help humanity. To keep order.
Good intentions,
Very good intention,
Yes.
Good intention. But I still, we have also kind of political correctness, and in our today's world, and so for me it has been, it is on a daily basis it has been a kind of a conflict in myself.
The political correctness. The political correctness.
Especially with regard to women. Me Too, the Me Too movement. Yeah. Because on the one hand, I completely agree with them. I see, yes,
the oppression of women is obvious, is historically well documented.
Yes, the oppression of women, and just I understand. Of course, they don't want to be looked at only as an object.
Yes.
But I have been thinking, it's now getting old. It's more easy for me to deal with this.
The same here. All those fiery desires are dissolving into the placidity of old age, because the organism is not working as it used to. That helps.
But I say to myself, okay, I can understand if young men has difficult times with all this, with the sensations and how they, what they can say and what they can do and all this kind of thing. So, yeah.
But to become sensitive, see that whole thing, right? To become sensitive to the whole implications of the prejudices, the attitudes one has learned. Some of it is just animal behavior. So there's a lot of just that, right? And like, the women saying, we don't want to be considered sexual objects. But then they dress in such a way that they're, calling for something. There's an announcement of a sexuality. You also have to understand what are signals. What are signals, what are not signals? And what signals are you giving? And you say, I like it to be free and I like to dress like this because it's an expression of myself. Well, are you aware of what you're expressing? Yeah. So there is also that. You see, there's political correctness. Political correctness is also another way of collectively trying to bring order to human relationships, right?
It is.
And therefore, good intention again. But then you can fail to see the implications. I mean, the whole spectrum of issues involved, because it has to do with what you see. The society is promoting sex all over the place.
Oh yeah.
There's no question about it.
No.
And then people complain that people are being seen as sexual objects.
Yeah.
Well, then you have to do something about the culture as a whole and what it is promoting. See, we're in contradiction culturally. You promote sex, and of course the primary sexual object is the woman, because she's the most beautiful thing. We are not beautiful, really, men.
No.
I mean, there's some handsome men out there, but good luck to them. But but women are generally, the ones who of our species, the half of our species, who sort of show these qualities of wonderful beauty. I don't know. So we all fall for it.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you're just promoting sexuality, even commercially, right? The whole sense of female beauty as an announcement for all kinds of products. See, we're exploiting that thing. We're exploiting our instincts. We're exploiting a fundamental primary instinct. The dog will salivate every time he sees food. You present the food and the dog salivates, and then you tell, no, that's politically incorrect. Yeah. Well, don't put me the dish right there in front of me. So you have to change the whole structure. It has to be thorough. You see, that's what I also find.
But it seems that we are touching upon a point where human beings go, the intention is good, but the means are wrong. And the means.
This is what we're saying. All true.
And all true, yeah. And we are pointing out, the suggestion would be we have to. You said sensitivity. It's all about sensitivity in a way. You can say, but sensitivity is more basic than what you should do or what is correct and not correct.
Not correct. I think it's deeper.
Yeah.
Because it's perception, is seeing how my actions, my conditioned outlook, for example, on women or on whatever it is, my prejudices, cultural prejudices and so on, are creating conflict in there. They are distorting relationship. If I see women only as sexual objects, obviously that relationship will be distorted. I will not take the whole person at all. No. And they might even be, because of the pressure of society, and because men are the masters of social value, they will fit into that picture. And therefore it distorts their own being. You see, we distort each other's being this way. Yeah. So there's a loss of dignity, a loss of integrity, and an implicit usage, relationships of use and convenience. See, there's a degeneration somewhere there, but that we'll only see if we are sensitive to it. We're sensitive to the underlying feeling of suffering, particularly, I feel. Now, the sense of what you do is actually undermining the integrity of someone else, and yours as well, because at that point you yourself have failing of true concern, true care. Just you who's important. The whole thing of me as the primary focus of all my values is therefore the rest of the world and everything else has value only in relation to me, which is a complete distortion, in my opinion, of value, right?
Yeah. But in a way, as a kind of an image or reality, I think that is what is going on. The me is going on.
Yeah.
And the me is only concerned with, in the end, with the me.
What else? There's nothing else, is there? It's me. It's a solid system of sorts. Oh God, yeah, guys.
So
yeah,
and then where does it bring us? Because because we have come to relationship and peace in a relationship.
Yes, at home. And in a relationship, and in myself.
And in myself,
what you pointed out earlier.
So one of the things which maybe we point to is that it's dangerous when the only interest we have in each other is kind of, what do I get out of this? you know, that's
self-interest.
self-interest. So, yeah.
That becomes always the question. See, can we relate without self-interest? And I think we've been trained to do that the whole time. So we're heavily conditioned in that direction, to consider that the self-interest is the primary motivation of our actions at every single point, in relation to everything. And to say, well, but watch it. See, the moment you enter self-interest, you distort the values of relationship, because it's all in relation to you and what it means to you. But relationship is not you. Relationship is a vast, complex network of interactions which works as a whole. The wholeness of it is distorted by the emphasis on the me. You could put it that way. And I think it's pretty obvious when you look what's happening in the human relationship. The moment there's somebody who's just, and that's the part of the question of power also, because it's domination. Somebody must dominate, because the other has to be used for that particular purpose by somebody else, you see. So we're all being used and abused anyway. So there's a sense of, this just distorts the value of relationship. Relationship is something else. Relationship is what? Cooperation, affection, love, call it love. So what does it mean to not have that emphasis on me? What would it mean? You know?
Also, I just think that, you know, relationship without any purpose. Something like I was just...
It's not a means to an end.
Right, no means to an end. You know, is there, you know, and in a way also we have touched a little bit upon our relationship to nature.
And a little bit.
Yeah,
go on,
nature and I mean, sometimes I think we all feel or have a state of mind or something where this question of purpose has fallen away. You know, there's no purpose in looking at the bird in the sky and the mountains. There's no real purpose, but there is a kind of, there's something other. There's another thing taking place in a way without purpose. So.
Maybe that's part of what love means. That we don't have a relationship of means and end. That there's no interest there, like he might say, no motive. And that happens also, right? Suddenly you look at your girlfriend and you just marvel at this person. They are what they are, and they may have glitches here and glitches there, and their nose is not quite straight. But it doesn't matter, because you're no longer measuring in that way. You're no longer comparing at all. There's a moment of presence that has no purpose in itself. The sense, and you could say that for nature. Nature is the sense of purpose may be a small channel of the mundane, ordinary, or even biological level of need, the thing in which it moves. But there is a vast, broader spectrum of existence in which relationship cannot be channeled in this way. And that in fact, if one doesn't rise to that level of dissolving the whole structure of purpose, one misses out on the real totality of existence itself. For example, on beauty. Right? Yeah. Or love, or compassion, or I don't know, that sort of things that no longer, they are themselves purposeless. And he's always going for the purpose. One narrows it down, brings it to another level where its wholeness is diminished, at least, if not destroyed altogether. So I think that's I think a very important observation to make.
And also I'm thinking that something like, I think it has connection to this, that, you know, if for some reason judgment or evaluation of people, you look at people And normally, normally it's I'm not even aware of it, but interesting, not interesting people, beautiful, not so beautiful, and that my attention goes to the interesting and to the beautiful. That's kind of, I don't have to think about it, it's just happening. But sometimes if this whole process of recognition or evaluation and ideals and all this kind of thing, fell asleep or something, then something totally different takes place. And then beauty has another, everything is beautiful.
Yeah, I was going to say it, but I didn't want to interrupt you. In this beautiful meditation, beautiful. That is how beautiful the ugly become when the self is not looking. Right. It's a way of putting it. I mean, my own language and so on. Right. Yeah. The real beauty does not depend on the measure of beauty.
No.
Depends on the eye and how free it is from any preconception and any choice. That's real sensitivity. I was very surprised when I was reading Kay in the earlier days of his talking about sensitivity being to the beautiful and the ugly. In fact, not even making that distinction. And beauty being, in fact, as he used to put it, when the self was not, which I, being a lover of art and so on, I used to say, well, I was more with the Greeks, right? Of saying beauty is proportion. Right proportionality, and you learn to draw and you learn to situate it so that it sort of makes a balanced composition, and it's sort of this way, proportional here, and proportionality, right? And he doesn't touch it, proportionality. He takes it, of course, strictly psychologically, and saying that is the key is whether the self is there or the self is not. And the moment the self is there, beauty is not. He said, well, Mamma Mia, I will never meet beauty. But this is what you're saying, I just to stay with your thing, it's, I think, very, very important to acknowledge that the fact that the beauty and the ugly really becomes beauty itself because of the perception, because of the quality of the perception, when there is not even that measurement at all. No image, no measure, no proportion, nothing at all, and that's the beauty of that is incredible. When the self is not, I mean, very few times that happened to me. It's quite extraordinary because it has nothing to do with anything being beautiful or not beautiful. It's beauty itself. The coming upon what beauty itself is. It's not even a thing. It's a state of perception, quality of perception. Without a center, like he used to say.
Yes, and that is, I just remember some instances where I think something like that happened to me. There seems to be a whole new stream of information coming to you. A kind of factual information. And it's quite, and it's a very living.
Totally.
It's totally living thing. I think we have talked for some time.
We talked for some time,
and I don't. So I just check it up. Yes. More than an hour.
Okay.
And I think we have to come to an end.
No.
But how have we come to peace with anything, or
not necessarily? No.
You mean I want to?
Do you want to come to?
I want to fix this problem of conflict.
Yes,
I want to be.
Yes.
I want to come to the end of it. Now it must end.
You asked earlier. What price are you willing to pay? Kay asked this question. And I said, why is he asking a commercial question? What price? But it means, because indeed it means, what are you willing to give up for it? If you really want peace, what do you have to give up? And look what we have to give up. It's a long list. At least we touched on a lot of it, you see? At least that much, right? Not sure we solve the problem of peace. We are concerned with peace, you and I. closely, personally, and worldwide. No question. But then it means you and I have to give up identification with nation, with race, with all that which separates people and causes them to be at each other's throats. So anything that gets us to be at each other's throats, we have to give up. And that means also to give up our arrogance, our pride, and we even mention self-interest. When it comes to relationship, for example, which is a major field, which is the field of our lives, right? With the women, with men, with the nature, with the whole thing. So it means almost, like he used to put it, we have to come to the point that as long as I think I am something or someone, I'm bringing that divisive border which will create conflict. So look at it, the price we have to pay. The price is nothing less than our psychological identity. It's a huge price that we don't even know what it means to pay it, because we're so tight, identified and completely immersed in it. But it's a very beautiful indication as to the depth of negation, in the sense he means it, of ending of the false. Because if this is the source of conflict and we want peace, we will never have it as long as we remain within that center. And he says that separation is false anyway. So we have to come to the point of understanding. It's not even a price that you have to pay. It's just the dissolution of an illusion to which we have given the wrong value. So this means to see through that false value of our identity as the focus of our being. And then we can meet. Then we can have peace, because it is, like he used to say, our world. It's one world, one humanity, one consciousness, and if you like, one cosmos. The whole thing can only be one, which is where peace resides, in that harmony of the whole, when we dissolve this identity of ours. I find that beautiful, challenging, and, like I used to say, almost impossible. But necessary, right? It was impossible to go to the moon by rowing a boat, right? But then they found
Yeah.
They wanted to go to the moon, so they went to the moon. Why wouldn't we go to this level of freedom?
Yeah.
Right? This is a challenge.
I think that was it.
All right, thanks.
I'm happy.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
we could go on talking for ages. This is a very beautiful conversation, Henrik.
Thank you.
Oh. Thanks a lot.